And so I just remember how it taught me to engage girls,
Really?
like engage girls at school, how to talk about them, how to think about them, how to view them. And so I just remember
Definitely.
getting up. I would wake up as a high school kid and think, who am I going to try and have sex with today? What's up, guys? RLTKPHX podcast, Real Talk Phoenix, episode 5.
5.
We're in the house. Super excited to be with you today. And we wanted to take a moment to talk to you guys about something that's affected a lot of our lives. It's pretty pervasive in our culture. We mentioned it in our last podcast a little bit, and that is the issue of pornography. We know that it's something that is affecting a lot of people in a lot of different ways. Traditionally, it's been something that men have participated in, right?
Yep.
And we've seen now in our culture that it's actually something that men and women are participating in a lot more.
Yeah.
And then also we know that there's this reality that younger and younger kids are starting to engage in pornography as well. I think by the age of 11 or something like that, 90% or 80% have been exposed to pornography, right? And so we just wanted to take a little bit of time today to share our own stories concerning this topic, this issue, talk about the effects that we see it having in young people, and then also talk a little bit about how parents can engage this issue with their teens. So, John, share with us a little bit about your journey and how you've experienced pornography.
Yeah, for sure. I lived I guess the best place to start is to talk about my home life when I was growing up.
Yeah.
And my father's mother, my grandmother, she was married to a gentleman who, it wasn't my grandfather, it was my step-grandfather.
Okay.
And she was married to him, and he had several pornographic magazines in the home, and I wasn't aware of that. It's my first memory that I have of exposure to pornography as a child, and it was literally in my own home.
Wow.
I say my own home. It was in my family
family
home, right?
environment, right?
Yeah. And so the first time I had discovered it was in this way that they were hidden, and I found them. And I'll never forget when I found them, it was like I discovered some kind of treasure chest, right? Because I found them and I was consumed all day, or what seemed like all day. I was in a position where I was in a room by myself, and I had found them, and I was just like, I remember time stopped, and I saw something, and I was like, whoa, what is this? So something was very appealing about it. I was very curious about it, but I didn't realize in that moment the kind of legacy that it was going to have moving forward in my life. And basically that curiosity was something that turned into an addiction in my life at some point.
Wow.
And the thing that, hindsight looking back on it, the genesis of all that was in my own family situation. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
And so my story is one of, I think especially for parents who are trying to do something to prevent their children from being exposed, the best thing that you can do is not have that kind of stuff in your house or on your phone or whatnot, if you're really concerned about protecting your children.
Yeah.
And so for me, the beginning of my story is that my exposure came in the home. It wasn't because of friends or anything else. It was literally my family.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so how have you seen that play out as you, through your teenage years? How do you see that exposure play out, and what effects did it have?
Well, I think the first thing that for me was that because I found it in my family home, it was something that a family member that I respected had, it instantly made me think it wasn't that big of a deal.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So for me, it was like, oh, well, if my grandfather or, whoever in my home is looking at this and the people who live in the home aren't losing their mind about it, it must be something that's okay.
For sure.
Right? And maybe okay in that way when you're a kid. And I don't know what kind of household most parents, are providing for their children, but the kids accidentally get some alcohol at a party, or they do whatever. And it's like, there's certain things in the home that most parents are like, you shouldn't touch this, but we have it in the home.
Yeah.
And so I would say things like pornography or other things like that. It's kind of like, I kind of equate those two. And so for me, I guess the legacy was moving forward. I felt like it wasn't that big of a deal.
Wow.
And so it was something that, and no one had that conversation with me because at that point in time, our family wasn't pursuing anything in terms of religion or improving our lives in those areas. And so it was literally one of those things that I had to find out later on in my life how detrimental it was. And it was basically when I became a young man and those things had started to kind of, when my hormones and stuff started becoming more activated, that those things really, well, like I said, started out as curiosity, became an addiction. And that's really been the story of my life, you know, even to this day with the internet and just social media, the way some people post things, you know, whether they intend to or not, you know, it's one of those things that seems like now, especially with phones and technology, the internet, you can almost never get away from it.
Yeah.
And it's like it's like people realize that
one click away.
Yeah, marketers or companies realize that people are addicted to it.
Yep.
And so they intentionally perpetuate that to keep people addicted to sell things, it seems.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, to get your attention.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about my own experience. So I was exposed by, I think I remember I was like, there's the backstep when I was growing up, there was like a banister that you could look through and you could see into the living room. And I'm pretty sure the first time I saw something, like I had like kind of crept downstairs to see what my dad was up to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure he was watching something he wasn't supposed to be watching, or at least, you know, whatever. And so there was that. And then the first time that I really got into it was with one of my best friends.
Mm-hmm.
So I stayed the night at his house.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, yo, we gonna check this out tonight. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like, oh, snap.
Yeah.
And so when that happened, I think I was right around 10,
wow.
11. And so, yeah, right at that stage in your life where like hormones are starting to spike, right?
Mm-hmm.
Starting to think about girls and all those different types of things. And I mean, I'm from Europe. So in terms of being sexualized in culture, I think quite possibly, at least when I was growing up, it was sooner. We were a little bit ahead.
Yeah.
And so that kind of began the process for me. And then it just became this like diving in, like headlong.
That's when it started?
Yeah. And so for me, it was kind of like that fascination, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then and then there's like, it's kind of weird because like, even though there's that fascination, there's like a little bit of shame involved.
Yeah,
right?
that's
like,
true.
You feel a little bit dirty, like, oh, what is this? What am well, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be doing this, but I like it, so I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And then you figure out more ways to get your hands on it, and you figure out more ways to keep it quiet. But I think the thing that I remember the most distinctly about that journey, so, you know, pornography wasn't something I stopped participating in until I was about 22, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been cool that for, you know, a number of years, I can say I've been clean, because I think it literally is, you know what I'm saying?
Like an addiction.
Yeah, like, I mean, we know that scientifically it's dumping chemicals in your brain, you know, like sugar or like heroin, cocaine, you know what I'm saying? Like it's a drug addiction, like the same kind of things that are going off in your brain. And so I just remember how it taught me to engage girls.
Really?
Like engage girls at school, how to talk about them, how to think about them, how to view them. And so I just remember
definitely
getting up. I would wake up as a high school kid and think, who am I going to try and have sex with today? Or what am I going to watch today? Those would be some of my first thoughts. Goodness. Right? And then it was finally, we were growing in the age where like phones started to have video, right? And everybody's sending around those 2-3 minute clips. And so I just remember like everybody's sending porn to each other. Everybody's looking at stuff, watching stuff, sending each other websites.
Right.
And so it just like, we were like coming of age in that moment where it was becoming a thing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because before it's like you had to buy it on cable TV. You know what I'm saying? And like you couldn't exactly buy it without your parents finding out, right? So you couldn't really do that. And so, I remember just how it taught me to basically look at girls like they were just objects to be used for my pleasure, right? And so it became all about that. And it became all about boasting about that to my friends. And then it became all about, well, who are you watching? Sending each other names of different people, different women that were performing these acts, right? And so I just became consumed by it, man. Like, yeah, it like literally ordered and shaped my world.
What do you think consumed you? What was it? What was that aspect of it that made you think about it and dwell on it all the time?
I think it was my ability to like get it when I wanted it, right? The convenience of it, the fact that I could pick what I wanted, when I wanted, how I wanted.
Wow.
And it almost became this thing where I would rather do that than engage with another human.
Why?
Because I think it was the convenience of it.
Really?
Yeah, I think it was just the reality that like, hey, I can have what I want, when I want, how I want, however I want in my mind, and whatever I want to fulfill. So right, yeah, whatever I want to engage in that moment.
And that's easier than a relationship.
Yeah, way easier because a relationship requires something of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
It requires me to give that person what they want, and then they give me what I want. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, I know relationships more than that, but at least then, for me, a relationship would have been more transactional, and it would be this reality that I have to give something to get something. With pornography, I don't have to give anything. I just type in an address, and I'm good to go. You know what I'm saying? And I click play on whatever I want to click play on. And so yeah, man, as I think about that, I just think about how much that shaped me. And then even as a married man now, you know what I'm saying? Like how, like that stuff follows you, you know what I'm saying?
That's true.
And so there's always this residue that follows you. And there's always this, like the comparison game that you have to fight and all those different types of things, right? Super interesting. Like people think there's going to be no consequences to their actions. Like the body keeps count, you know what I'm saying? Your mind keeps count, your heart keeps count. And so it's like all that stuff you've been engaging in follows you into your later years in life and affects your ability to relate to people and how you view people.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying? And so in my mind, I have a tendency to just view people, if I'm not careful, as objects. And I know that's directly tied into the things that I was doing as a young man and basically my exposure and engagement in pornography.
So the pornography didn't just have an effect concerning the way you handle your sexuality, it actually had an effect concerning all of your relationships.
Yeah, the way I view people.
Yeah.
And so,
wow.
I think there was a study that come out, right, that said that people who watch pornography, literally, it trains their brain, and I mentioned this in the last podcast, it trains their brain to think about other people like objects.
Yeah.
So their brain, like kind of the functioning, the way that it's being triggered and the way that it's going off on like an MRI or whatever else would be the same as if they were looking at like a lamp or something of that nature, right? It's not triggering them the same way it should when you look at a human being. Their brain's not responding that way. The brain's responding the same way it would if they were looking at a table.
Goodness
you know
gracious.
what I'm saying? And so it's crazy to think about that's actually what it's doing to the brain, right? Like, I love that organization, Fight the New Drug, right? All the stuff that they're putting out on this issue, all the content, all the statistics, all the research. Like there was some research that came out the other day about young people, and what we want to dive into now is like how is pornography affecting young people, right?
Yeah.
And so it reminds me of this study that they were doing, and they did it in Australia, but they surveyed a bunch of young girls and young guys, and basically these young girls were saying like, because of pornography, like I have to have sex in order to have a relationship with a dude. And so this one girl was talking about how her boyfriend would come over to watch a movie. She's 15, and she'd have to have sex with him in order to be able to watch the movie. And so all she wants to do is spend time with him and relate and connect. And she's like, well, I have sex with him so I can get it out of the way so that we can actually have a relationship with each other. And in some cases, they were talking about how girls would exchange sex for kissing. So a guy would be like, I'll kiss you if you have sex with me. So I'll show you, I'll give you a glimmer of intimacy, like a glimmer of affection, right?
Yes.
If you will give your body to me. And so these girls are like, feeling like, well, if I'm going to have a boyfriend and if I'm going to have any types of relationships, this is what I've got to do in order to have them.
Goodness gracious.
And so it's pretty crazy to think about that is what's going on with our young people.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I'm noticing right now when I talk to people, and especially young people in their struggles, it's a little bit different when you and I were struggling. As you said, the first thing that came out were, the ability to send little short clips and thumbnails and stuff like that when technology was in the beginning, before we got 5G and all of the things that we've got now, right? And what I've noticed now is there's this combination between internet pornography or whatever creators of pornography and social media. Yeah. So the platforms, one of the most popular platforms right now out there, and I'm not saying it to endorse it, it's Pornhub, and this is where most teenagers, most people are using it.
Yep.
And one of the things that they're starting to do on their platform right now is transition it to where you can build a social media profile on their platform.
Wow.
So it's not that your teenagers actually, so teenagers have to deal with this now, not just the fact that they are going to be consuming content, but you're going to have to deal with the fact that your teenager will be producing and distributing content on a digital platform.
Dang.
And that's a big difference generationally. It's one thing to watch other people. It's another thing to be a content producer, a pornographer yourself.
Yeah.
And it's just a slippery slope, and it's easy because when you're a teenager, you get dared to do something. Who hasn't played spin the bottle? And that's part of being a teenager, is taking a dare and showing that you've got moxie or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so, we're not talking about jumping off of the roof of your house into a swimming pool anymore. We're literally talking about your teenager being dared to create and distribute pornography.
Dang. And then it makes me think about Snapchat.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And the things that are happening in there, the countless times that we've been in schools and heard about the epidemic of nudes.
Yes.
Right? And so I know that you mentioned something that's really interesting. You say that, like, sending messages on Snapchat is almost like the new form of flirtation.
Yeah.
Like, can you kind of speak into that a little bit?
Yeah. And so, again, like I was talking about the social media element of pornography right now, it's not just that you're trying to see something. It's literally that you are creating and producing it. Now, what happens with teenagers when they start to find one another, maybe they don't know certain things or what they've done before in the past, but when they get to know each other, maybe they meet up and then they start talking through text messages or some sort of application or whatever that they have that they can message and communicate through.
Yeah.
And what typically tends to be the case, what I've seen with teenagers is, it's like, yo, sir, are you going to send me some nudes?
Yeah.
That's kind of a regular thing. And it's what I remember the first time I went out on a date with a girl, and I remember my palms sweaty thinking, am I going to grab this girl's hand?
Yeah.
Like, it was such a big thing for me to work up the courage to go to the movies and to hold a girl's hand.
Yeah.
Right? And that I felt like something because I did
something,
that.
Right?
Yeah,
And
it took courage, right? And so that's the thing that I see is similar about this generation, that they're communicating and they're trying to work up the courage to say, hey, I like you more than just friends. But now the way they're doing it is they're not holding hands in a movie theater. They're sending nudes to one another.
Yeah. Or as I would point back to that study, as I was reading that stuff, it's like guys are quite aggressively asking for this stuff. And if
girls are quite willing to do it as well.
Okay.
And I think that that's the thing that's really shocking. There's been this cultural view of girls, and maybe some of that's completely inappropriate. I don't know. There needs to be a lot more research, in my opinion, on it. But it seems that pornography is not just something that men are into. Men are into it for different reasons.
It's changing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think girls realize, hey, what have I done? I haven't had to make out with some guy in some sweaty car. What have I done when I've sent a nude, especially if I can airbrush it and get all kinds of attention? I haven't actually done anything physically.
Yeah.
I've done something, but I've also gotten lots of attention back from it. So the motivation is, I really didn't do much, but I got all this attention. And maybe people don't notice me at school or don't notice me here or notice me there. But once you create something, you airbrush it, you do whatever, and you post it online or share it with someone, and then it gets shared and distributed. Yep. It's like, what I feel like young women are realizing is, whoa, like generations before in the past, if something like that came out, it was highly embarrassing. But for many girls today, now it's kind of like, it's a way to achieve popularity.
Dang. Yeah, I remember you bring up something in my mind. It's no longer about becoming famous. It's about like a sense of infamy, right?
Yes.
It's about doing something in order to be noticed. And
they're equally powerful.
Yeah, it's all about being provocative in this age, right?
Yes.
And obviously, this is an easy way to do it, right?
Yeah.
And
what's sad is you do most of that stuff when you're young, and you come to regret it later on in your life.
Yeah, it's true.
So there's a whole generation of teenagers that are perhaps sabotage their future because of things that they put out. If someone were to ever find that, I read another article recently says like, does your internet history ever really get deleted? And
Yeah,
that was,
technically it doesn't. It
yeah,
goes out
technically
into
it
that.
doesn't. Yeah, it becomes
always-
metadata. It becomes,
zeros and ones.
yeah.
Hmm.
And so who knows what the future ramifications of people who can hack software or whatever, that they'd be able to find your digital footprint and everything that you've ever looked at. And let's say at some point you achieve success and then someone has that dirt on you
Yeah.
and they air that.
Yeah.
I mean, kids are just not conscientious right now. And that's the thing that I've noticed when I talk. It's this very laissez-faire attitude about it. Like, man, who cares?
Yeah. I was reading an article. I think it was either Pew Forum or it was Fight the New Drug Again. And they were making this point that kids aren't even necessarily worried about revenge porn anymore.
Yeah.
It's just like part of the process. And obviously what
Right.
revenge porn is you send something to somebody while you're in a relationship, you guys break up, they get upset at you, and the way they get back at you is to basically expose all the nudes that you sent to them to everybody else.
Absolutely.
And so the data said that kids aren't even as worried about that anymore. It's just normal. Like, hey,
Yeah.
that's what's going to happen. I'm more worried about like the relationships that I have and those not being affected or those not being damaged or me not being viewed a
Yeah.
particular way. And so
Yeah.
like, I'm expecting that to happen. That's part of the process of our relationships. I'm just trying to make sure that I can do like, what you call it, like damage limitation.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to think about. I think another thing to think about as well, tied up in this whole thing, is obviously the industry is massive. It's generating
Goodness.
billions of dollars, right? I think like over 20% of its like global, the money that it's actually generating is in the United States, right? So like we're consuming billions of dollars worth of pornographic content, and then
to our own detriment.
there's this reality that it's also heavily tied to sex trafficking, right?
Yes.
And I think about the fact that we're in Phoenix, Arizona, and I think we were at one point, I'd have to check again this year, the number 2 state in the United States for sex trafficking, right?
Yeah, I think it's been number 1 before as well. Yeah.
And so you just think about that, the places where, those things are happening and people are being pushed and peddled through, and this reality that like a lot of the people that are participating in the creation of this stuff are actually being trafficked.
Yeah,
That's what the statistics say. So we're actually contributing to sex trafficking.
Absolutely. And I think, I don't know if we're going to talk about this, but if we are, I'm just going to kind of allude to it a little bit right now. Right. The thing with social media, the social media aspect, that's when you marry the pornography with it, it's not just that other people can communicate with you online, but there's literally the opportunity to go beyond the communications, the sending of pictures, and we get into what's called hookup culture.
Yeah.
And I know that there have been lots of talks about applications and things like that people can meet and meet up for things with.
Yep.
But I think that this social media part that I was hinting to earlier is getting us to a place where that's going to become more and more regular.
Yeah.
The situation I think that parents aren't aware of is literally how vulnerable their teenager is to other people who are trying to either see them or actually gain access to them.
Yeah.
And the thing that's kind of scary about it is literally you have teenagers meeting up with adults in some scenarios where it's a very dangerous situation. But teenagers, I read an article recently, are catching on to this. And they're starting to kind of themselves target predators. Like, in other words, if they get, someone reaching out to them and they become aware that this person's an adult pretending to be a teenager, they'll tell their other teenage friends, hey, this person is trying to get me. Let's go meet them up and jump them.
Wow.
And that's happening. And the reason I bring that up is I know that this gets a little wild, but you see the things that are on television and on movies right now, it's propagating teenagers to become courageous. Like all of the shows, the teenagers are the superheroes.
Yeah.
The young people are the ones that really get it and really understand. And I feel like that's what's kind of happening with social media right now.
Yeah.
We kind of live like in the Walking Dead type scenario, right? Where it's this dangerous world out there. Infrastructure is kind of broken down. Society is kind of breaking down. And the only people who have any sense how to lead us forward are the young people.
Wow.
Because technology is the real world for them.
Yeah.
And as society continues to grow, that's going to become even more and more advanced as far as our entree into technology and how much we live our lives on it, right? Mm. And so we're in the middle of this weird cultural revolution, I guess you might say.
Yeah.
And it really seems that teenagers know a lot more about what's really going on. And so I think for people like us with Real Talk, we're having conversations with teenagers. We're learning a lot of stuff, and we're trying to share this information with parents so we can say, hey, here's the stuff to be aware of. But the thing that's really got me startled right now is just like how tough you got to be a teenager to survive in this world. You really do have to be a superhero.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because of how dangerous the world really is.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I think parents are kind of sleeping on right now. It's like, man, do you realize how vulnerable your child is?
Yeah, I mean,
with this phone,
can
with this
access
computer.
to them, right?
Absolutely.
Anybody can gain access to them, and they can gain access to anybody, or anybody at least that has a phone or a device
Absolutely.
that's connected to the internet, right? I remember before as well, you mentioned the ability to actually, so you were talking about that particular porn site, and you were talking about the ability to sign up, and then the transactional aspect now, like the ability to you can actually make money.
Yes.
Right? From
yes.
engaging.
Yes.
And so speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So if you look at some of, like, you have Apple Pay on your phone, right? Or the Cash App.
Venmo, Cash App.
There's all sorts of ways that you can send money to people.
Mm-hmm.
And so if your teenager has a phone and they have the Cash App or anything like that set up on it, if they perform something and they give those credentials to someone on social media, it's like, hey, or if they have an Amazon account, they can create wish lists on their Amazon account. And it's like, yo, this is if you notice your teenager having random gifts show up out of nowhere, or, they all of a sudden have money that they didn't have before, or they're spending time on their phone and it seems, if you feel weird, I would say go investigate it.
Oh, for sure.
But think about this. Like, so you have now the incentive to be popular.
Yep.
But not just popular, but popular and rich.
Wow.
So now
popular and have money, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Now, depending on how popular you are, right? But this is the point. Like, you've got these people who are connecting with your teenager, who are watching your teenager, and your teenager is like commodifying it or like making money off of it, right?
They can, yeah.
They can. And I think that that's the thing. Again, when you think of the nuances of pornography right now, when we're telling kids, some of these kids are in poverty.
Yep.
Some of these kids are in situations in their home life where they just want to get out.
Yep.
There's so many things like with your kids right now. If you don't handle this thing right, not only could you kick them out thinking, well, once they realize how hard it is in the real world, they'll come back. No, not if they realize that their phone is a digital pimp that's going to protect them and get them into places, right? And so this is my point. You kick your kid out, you may be kicking them right into the industry.
Wow.
Right. And I know that not every kid's happening that, and that's not what's going on. I'm just talking about the nuances right now of social media, the financial aspect with how easy it is to get money from other people digitally.
Yep.
And then obviously the porn industry, they have incentive, man. They want new stars. They're looking for new talent. It's like the un-American idols that they're trying to discover or whatever,
Yeah. And I think it's important for us to say, like, hey, we're researching this, reading about this, hearing about these things. Mm-hmm. And so our job in this is to bring this information to you.
Absolutely.
I recognize that some of the things we're saying may be heavy, but we feel like that's our job, right?
Yeah.
And so we want to give you this information about things that are happening, so you can either A, talk to your teen about it and figure out what's going on with them, or B, inform them about the possibility of things that can happen. Not to like use it as a scare tactic for them to like never have a phone or never go out, but so that they can be safe and be aware of potential things that are happening. And the chances are they'll probably know anyway. You'll probably talk to them and they'll be like, oh yeah, I've been knowing about that. I know 10 people at my school, or I know, I got whatever, people online that are doing that stuff. Yeah. All right. So as we move on and kind of wrap up this podcast, I think the last issue or question we need to address is, how can parents actually engage or deal with this issue pertaining to their teenager, right? Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I think of. Number one, once again, it's a new world out there, right? The way they're engaging, the way they're doing things. And so I think one of the most important things that parents can do is become students, right? Yeah. And so this idea of, right, asking your teen what's going on, how people are engaging, asking them what their friends are doing and why and how, asking them how certain apps and things are working, and just kind of diving into that world, learning from them, allowing them to teach you so that you can get a grasp on what's going on and how teens are engaging and building relationships and what they're sending to each other, right? I feel like a lot of times teenagers, they can be kind of hesitant to share about them, but when you make it about their friend, right, they kind of open up a little bit more. And it's like, well, my friend does this, right? And so you have that conversation. But as we know, obviously, if those people are their friends, they're influencing them. And so
Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, we need to start off by really coming underneath them and letting them help us understand what's going on, how kids are engaging with pornography, what things are being sent at school, what apps they're using, what websites they're using, and those different types of things, so that we can like create a picture and a scenario in our mind of what's actually happening.
Yeah.
I think that takes, once again, curiosity and not fear.
Yeah.
So this is one of those things that's really important, because obviously if you find out that your teen is engaging in some behaviors that you would consider promiscuous or unbecoming, negative, right? The first thing you're going to want to do is shut that down. But the important thing to discover is why they're engaging in it in the first place, because what we want is transformation, right? What we want is heart change. What we want is for them to see that what they're doing is not going to produce anything good in their lives, and respond by turning away from that thing and turn into the wholesome life that you're calling them to live, right? And so in order for that to happen, it can't just be, hey, you can't do that. Let me take your phone. Let me do these things. Let me ground you. And I'm not saying those things aren't necessary.
Right.
But what I am saying is that because you're doing that because you want your kid to change, and you think, if I do this, then it prevents them from being able to do this. The problem with that is it doesn't change their heart, right? And so we need to have hard conversation, reflection, and questions being asked that challenge, and opportunity for them to think about and respond to those questions, so that transformation can actually happen, right? Yeah. And then I think a really important thing that parents can do as well is, once again, kids love blogs, they love articles, they love videos,
information.
So send them a bunch of information on the issue. So many websites out there. My favorite one right now is Fight the New Drug. They're doing amazing work when it comes to the issue of pornography.
I think it's FTND at Twitter, or at FTND on Twitter.
And then it's fighthenewdrug.org. I'm pretty sure.
They're always cranking out good information.
Cranking out content and information, blogs, articles, videos constantly. And so a great place for resources to go. And they're basing all of their stuff on research, you know what I'm saying? And so they're really engaged in this issue. I see them as a front runner in basically challenging the pornography industry, and trying to see young people move away from using and engaging in a material that is proven to be extremely destructive.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what you were talking, and I think there are several tactics that parents can employ to help their teenager stop doing the behaviors that they're doing that are destructive, that could lead to some really terrible consequences. But I think, just from my time dealing with people, I've found that there's a lot of people like myself, and I'm not saying this is everyone, but I think, just to give you a little backstory on me, I think I mentioned it earlier, I have personally struggled with pornography as a married man. Obviously, before I was married, and as someone who is a minister at one point in my life, and just generally a person trying to help others, including my family. And I think that there's a great deal of shame that comes into a person when they're struggling with something, but now their loved ones are also struggling with something.
That's good.
And so you start to feel guilt, like, oh, they're going through it because I went through it. There is some truth to that, but that doesn't mean it's your fault. Now, in some situations, it can be your fault. And so what happens, I think, is parents get into this mentality of, what can I really say to them? And what can you do, parent? You can humble yourself. You can go to your teenager and you can confess your own sin. And you can say, look, this has been an issue for me. Now, how transparent you are, that's up to you, but I would encourage that. And part of the reason for that is, if you and your teenager can have empathy and sympathy for one another, and see one another both as sinners and in this fight together, then it seems weird that there would be mutual accountability. But the way that a teenager holds you accountable is different than the way another grown adult holds them accountable.
No doubt.
But the point is, there is that accountability and transparency and honesty. And when your teenager feels like they can encourage you in that scenario, they have a different kind of motivation to get free. And, honestly, for me, no one dealt with it that way with me. And so I had years and years of just struggles until finally someone came into my life to help me. And so the other thing parents need to really take seriously is acting quickly before this issue takes root, because the hope is still here before it becomes an addiction, before it becomes something you struggle with.
A way of life.
Yeah. And so sharing those stories with your kids, your own personal struggles, they can see you in a different light. And they can see, like, wow, this thing really has affected. And be honest, it may have to be a family meeting that you call together, depending on your spouse and how much they know. But if you really want to deal with this kid and this situation, and you want to prevent your teenager from struggling the way you did, you've got to get a fire lit under you. You got to take initiative,
Yep.
Be transparent, be humble, have those conversations quickly.
And why would we say that? It kind of obviously leans us into, as we wrap this podcast up, the Christian perspective. But I think about this reality that Gen Z is looking for authenticity. I mean, millennials were looking and are looking for the same thing.
Yeah.
Want people to be real, open, honest with us, vulnerable. And the reality is, right, we're Christians, and so we believe fundamentally that what we live for and need is Jesus.
Absolutely.
And the important thing to understand about that is that we need heart change, right? And we all need it. It's not that just your teenager needs it. You need it too. It's not that just John needs it. I need it.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's this reality that what we want is for them not to behold their parents and think that their parents have got it all together and that they don't. And so they're a failure. But what we want them to understand is that, like, yo, my parents struggle with things like other humans do. And they've been through stuff just like me. And we can come together and we can struggle through and fight through this thing together. Man. Right? And so it's this reality of getting them to behold something else other than you, and getting them to behold something else other than possessions and material things.
That's
and
good, man.
Things in this world, or getting them to behold something other than, the beautiful woman that appears on the screen, you know what I'm saying, while they're watching the things that they're watching, and that being the ultimate ideal thing that they have to obtain in life. It's not, right? There's so much more to live for. And as Christians, we believe that we're put on this earth to love and to care for people and to see this world be transformed into what God truly intended it to be from the beginning. And so as I think about this issue, I think as, teenagers are transitioning, right, from being children to adults, the way that we have to interact and navigate our relationship with them changes, right? And so this is definitely a wisdom thing for you as a parent. You're going to have to think about, like, whether it's the right time to do that. Like, what's the right way to go about this? Like we've said before, you may need to seek professional help, right? You may need to go, if you have a community of trusted people around you, get them involved, ask them what you should do. If you go to a church, ask your pastors. You know what I'm saying? Like, trusted people around you that know you, that can speak into your life, good, solid wisdom, and can help you figure out how to combat this issue with your teen. And I know for me, when I was dealing with this issue, like, what I needed was, like, heart change, right? And I knew that the only way I could get it was by going to God. It wasn't something I could produce for myself, because I knew what I really wanted. I wanted this thing, right? But ultimately, I knew that this thing was going to lead me down a path to destruction. And so I needed, like, through prayer and those different types of things, reading the Word, the Bible, I found that, like, wow, there's so much more for me to have in this life, that God wants me to have a wife who I can enjoy sex with, and who I can enjoy intimacy and closeness and deepness and oneness and unity with, and produce children and enjoy the love and joy. Like, there's nothing like having kids and being with them and hugging them and kissing them and telling them that you love them and that they love you. There's nothing like laying next to your wife and staring at the stars, or, all those different types of things that happen in the context of that relationship. And that's what God designed
romance,
sex for, right, in that context. And so we've taken it and we're using it, and we're destroying ourselves in the process and each other. Yeah. And so as I think about that, I think, man, that's the challenge for us. Like, what are we going to do? Like, parents, what are you going to do? And obviously this has to start with you. If it isn't an issue for you, then dope. If it is, start with you. Get wisdom, get help, and then engage your team.
Man, that's so good.
All right.
That's perfect, man.
Well, that's episode 5 in the books. We love having these podcasts, having these conversations. We hope you guys are enjoying listening to them and watching them as much as we are making them. If you'd like to follow us on our social media platforms, we're on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You'll find us under RLTKPHX on any of those platforms. Give us a follow. If there's somebody that could benefit from hearing what we talked about today, go ahead and shoot it over to them. Yeah. If you're looking for content to help you engage your teenager in these conversations, we create a website with a bunch of content on it. It's rltkphx.org. Other than that, we love you guys. We'll keep walking this journey together. We'll keep fighting this good fight. We will talk to you guys soon.
Yep.
Peace.
Lessons.